If the government of the almighty sun, which is outside and external to the tree, decides to shine more sun today, or decides to shine less sun today, that could seriously affect the health of that tree. But really what we're talking about is the tree lives in an ecosystem with the sun, with the water, and with oxygen. And it's that very actual ecosystem that is being threatened today by businesses that are there to maximize profit. That ecosystem is being threatened because we as companies are trying to serve we as consumers and generate the profit that we invest into as shareholders. So governments need to be in place to be able to prevent this transition from happening. So thank you, and that's for this reason we believe that this resolution must stand.
Thank you everyone for being here for the last time. I'd first like to rebut the points that Side Proposition brought forward and then rebuild the opposition's case. Now what Side Proposition told you is that the main purpose of an organization is to maximize profit. However, what Milton Friedman actually said was that the main purpose of an organization is to maximize shareholder wealth. Now, if shareholders value environmental issues, if they value the environment around them today, then increasing shareholder wealth also means having sustainable practices and increasing shareholder wealth not only through dollar value, but through value in the environment. So this is the point that was brought forward about companies being solely profit-driven is simply not true. They're driven by shareholder interests. And if shareholder interest lies within the environment, then the company's interest lies within the environment. The Side Proposition also brought forward carbon emissions require government action in order to be decreased. Now I'd like to bring forward a very simple, very obvious example in which such a case did not occur. The cap and trade. If anybody knows about cap and trade, the European Union started a new program called the Emissions Trading Scheme, where companies were only allowed to emit so much, and that was the cap. But if you wanted to purchase more emission levels, you could do so by trading with other organizations. Now, by most accounts, this is not working. European nations have increased their carbon emissions since adopting this Kyoto Global Warming Treaty in 1997. In the first year of operation in 2005 and 2006, emissions covered by this trading scheme actually rose almost 1%. In comparison, the US, who did not adopt this treaty, decreased its emissions by 1.8%. What this program does is it allows you to drop the guilt associated with emitting because you are actually purchasing the right to emit. Now, if I'm allowed to do this because I'm paying for it, then there's nothing wrong with what I am doing. By allowing government to intervene in business practices, we are creating inefficiencies and we are dropping the guilt and the stigma associated with unsustainable practices. When the government involves themselves in industries that they don't necessarily know anything about, they create inefficiencies such as this. We also talked about about government action being necessary for change. Now, we have to consider that government intervention isn't always globalized. Globalized regulation is not feasible. What Side Proposition is proposing is not feasible. Can we think of any one global union that could impose change? The UN has tried on several occasions, such as the Kyoto Treaty, and this has not worked, as I have stated before. So really what we should consider is regulations that are alliances, not simply government intervention. Yes?
Why would shareholders invest in a company versus donating money to a company to help them become more sustainable?
Sorry, so your question is why would shareholders
invest their money into a company versus just donating money to a company to, say, be more sustainable?
Well, because obviously investing has a return. At the end of the day, money makes the world go round. Without it, we can't do anything. So a company is going to invest, a person, any one citizen, will invest in a company, obviously, as opposed to donating. Now, if we can invest in greener companies and give money, give our daily money, our earnings, to a company that is greener, why wouldn't consumers do so? Now, if the consumers push for this, that is where the change is going to come from. Government intervention only creates inefficiencies that the consumers don't always agree with either. Think about the carbon tax. Think about cap and trade. They are changes that are being imposed on everyone and that consumers don't always agree with either. Now, if we leave consumers with the choice of investing in a more sustainable company or a less sustainable company, would that not be a better option?
No, it would not. Ma'am, do you not believe in the tax system? Do you not believe that the tax system actually does shift people away from consuming certain things that government deems is not good? Do you not believe that?
Let's look at carbon tax. Who has the carbon tax hurt and who has it helped? The carbon tax is a part of the tax system. Now, has the carbon tax really helped or hurt the average citizen who has to drive his car every day? Yes, we are paying more taxes. Has it hurt the large corporation that has the bottom line, but will drive regardless? As they mentioned, the demand for gas is inelastic, and in particular, companies' demand for gas is inelastic. Has the carbon tax really hurt the company at the end of the day, or has it hurt the consumer? Government intervention does not always aim to or cater to what they aim to cater to. Now, to build my own point, I'd like to talk about pressure. Pressure in and of itself is antagonistic, it's coercive, and worst of all, it's reactive. Government pressure and government intervention is reactive. And short-term shallow engagement can only drive short-term marginal responses to what are very complicated problems. Now, if there was an easy solution, if there was a fair, obvious, financially viable solution that was staring us all in the face, would the companies not already be going for it? If only that was the easy way out. Ultimately, activism and government intervention is usually aimed at the biggest brands and not the biggest polluters. They're aimed at the companies they're aimed at companies where it's an easy target, where the media will eventually create a bigger issue of bigger companies where pollution is not necessarily the biggest problem. So the biggest brands will often be hit through activism and through government intervention, as opposed to the biggest polluters. Pressure is often ignorant, as I have already established. Thank you.
And, thank you to comedian for his excellent open floor. As we conclude this debate today, I'd just like to present three main topics why we oppose this motion, and we will wrap up with that. So my first topic is, and these are not new topics, but I'm building on what we've said earlier. So my first point builds on the point that my colleague said earlier, that business in and of itself is not opposed to sustainability. And my second point is going to be about the external versus the internal pressures and who the stakeholders are within organizations. And my third point is going to be who are the drivers within your organization. So my second and third point are very similar, but they are 2 points in and of themselves. So my first point is then business is not opposed to sustainability. There can be no one in business that does not sometimes wish for less pressure. Just as politicians think their jobs would be easier without the electorate, or teachers without pupils, business executives might prefer life with fewer activist campaigners, inquiring journalists, shareholder resolutions, or watchful regulators. Indeed, things might be easier since without demanding investigators or aggressive competitors. But none of these would make for a better business climate. What we were trying to bring forward is that business in and of itself is a champion for sustainability. If the technology exists, business will adapt to it. We can look at the automotive sector for an example. For many years, we look at North American automakers such as Ford and General Motors. For years, people have told them, outsider groups have told them that the gas-guzzling, high-polluting cars were too big, but they did not listen. Now we look at the position of Ford and GM as the large sports utility vehicles sit unsold in car lots, and the company's very survival is at stake. Unsustainable practices in this business led to an unsustainable business model, self-fulfilling failure. If green practices are good for business, companies will and should move towards those practices without unnecessary pressure. So we can see this as an organic moving within the company towards practices that are sustainable because the technology exists. Not because of government pressure, but it's because it's good for the business's bottom line. So then we see at this point that maximizing profits is not against sustainability, but rather for sustainability. If those practices and technologies exist that will make businesses more efficient, businesses will adapt them. On the other hand, if we have government-imposed regulations, this creates inefficiencies. These are pressures put on the government by businesses, forcing the business's hands to do what they don't want to do. And in the end, who loses? It's